Again, the Wisconsin and Maryland all night tip is at 6. Rural Mutual, the number one farm insurer in Wisconsin for a good reason. As a company founded by farmers, they understand the ag industry and its challenges. Local agents offer farm families the best advice and personalized coverage. Visit ruralmutual.com to find an agent near you. The Packers linebackers coach is in contention to be the Jacksonville Jaguars defensive coordinator. Anthony Campanelli just completed an interview with the Jaguars for the gig. 2024 was his first year with the Packers. Got a lot of credit for Edrin Cooper's very good rookie season. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, Print.
We need to continue to ramp up our sense of urgency. The life of a player in the National Football League is not very long. We got a bunch of good guys in that locker room. We got a bunch of talented guys in that locker room, and it's time that we start competing for championships, right?
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Circling back to that comment from Brian Gutekunst, I was made at his end of the season presser. Is that 3 weeks ago now? 2 weeks ago? It's been a couple of weeks, but I plugged that soundbite back into the intro because that's actually where I want to begin this evening. I want to talk a little bit about Brian Gutekunst and the job that he's done, especially in this era of Packers football, which I kind of consider to be the last 2 seasons, the last 2 off seasons, really the Jordan Love era. He operated a certain way the end of the string with Rodgers. It's not to say that that part of his general manager career doesn't matter. It's just not really what we're talking about now. He's building this thing back up. It's a completely different job with a different type of roster. It's just different. So that's where I want to begin tonight. That's why I plug that soundbite back into the intro, just to kind of get us into it. It's the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Hope you've had an excellent day. Should be plenty of time to take your calls if you want to talk Packers. We could talk Bucks. I watched the Bucks game last night, and it was nice to see Giannis and Dame clicking. It was nice to see Chris Middleton have a great game. I don't have a ton to say about it. Utah is not very good. They deserve a little credit for going out there and winning in a place that it's a hard place to go win. Don't get me wrong, so they get credit for that. Just not a lot to say on the Bucks game last night. If you have something to add, more than happy to take your commentary. 608-321-1670. Get to the phones right after the first break here. You can comment on the live stream as well. YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I'll also have a Brewers thought for you before the end of the show, because it is the off season. It's the quiet time of year, and yet I would still like a little more noise from the Brewers. There's one position of the team in particular that I'm starting to wonder. It's like, is this what we're doing going into the year? Are we really not going to add? Are we really not going to supplement this position or that position? So just a couple spots on the roster that I kind of want to circle. And because I like talking Brewers, we haven't done a Brewers segment in a while. We'll do that before 6 o'clock as well. I was driving home last night. I told you I wanted to start with Brian Gutekunst. I was driving home last night, and I was listening to a podcast further reacting to the NFC and AFC championship games, which actually we didn't talk about a whole lot last night. We talked about the conference title games to begin the show. We got the ball rolling, and then the calls started coming in, and it's, actually, I want to talk about Wisconsin, Nebraska. I want to talk. We didn't actually talk a ton, which is fine. I want to talk about what you want to talk about. Talked about fathers, the passing of Badger Bloody's father at 88. God rest his soul. Clemhead Mike shared the anecdote that he actually despised his father. That was a nice anecdote, all-time call, at least recently. We didn't talk a lot about the conference championship games last night, so I'm listening to a podcast on my drive home discussing Chiefs-Bills, certainly the game of the weekend and the bigger story, because you're dealing with legacies of 2 of the best players in the game right now. Certainly Patrick Mahomes, but also Josh Allen, who's had a lot of good cracks to break through and make a Super Bowl, and I think most believe that he is the second or third at worst, maybe best quarterback in football. Without the existence of Mahomes, he's probably in a Super Bowl or 2, and his legacy would probably be thought of his legacy. He's not done playing yet, but his ledger, his resume up until this point, right, it was on the line to a certain degree on Sunday night. So that was the big story, but also listening to some thoughts of this podcast talking about the Eagles and the Commanders, and specifically the Eagles, the job that Howie Roseman did building that roster from top to bottom, both sides of the ball. And I mentioned yesterday, like, the Eagles don't they don't have a weakness. They don't have a weak spot. Even the best teams in football, even the final 4 teams, let's just say Commanders, Eagles, Bills, Chiefs, and then if you want to go back a weekend, you could talk about the Rams. Definitely could talk about the Lions in this way as well. You could say, well, this team's unbelievable and they could win a Super Bowl. But if you're going to beat them, here's how. Here's where you attack them. Here's the path to potentially beating this team, even if it's a narrow path. That path normally exists for even the best teams, even the teams most likely to make or to win a Super Bowl. Path doesn't really exist for the Eagles. Right? Now you could say, well, their passing game sometimes comes and goes. And you'd be right. But it's not because they don't have talent. It's because, well, sometimes they just get bogged down beating your ass in the running game so bad that it takes a little momentum and a little flow away from the passing game. And their quarterback's not great, but their quarterback's not Jimmy G, right? Their quarterback isn't a complete and total pumpkin. He's just a little limited as a passer. There's some things that he does well. Sometimes, he doesn't exceed so well. But you know what? The guys he's throwing the ball to, they're pretty good. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. If that's the weakest part of your team is pretty darn stacked, top to bottom. There's not really a weakness on that Eagles roster. And I started to think, I like to poke holes at Howie Roseman because I think he's glazed over and over again by the NFL media. I mean, he trades a third for Jahan Dotson, who can't even play for the Commanders. And everyone's like, how did he do it? How did he get Jahan Dotson for a third? Okay, well, I talked about it at the time. I thought that was kind of like, we're really going to glaze him for that. That's a little weird. Or some of the draft picks. It's like, how did Howie pull this off? It's like, well, normally you can find why and how it happened. So I like to try to poke holes at Howie Roseman's team building and talk about maybe how some folks overreact to the job that he does. But look at this roster. And then I started to think about Brian Gutekunst and how far away this Packers roster feels. It feels far away. Not to say that they can't beat the Eagles, because the NFL is a small sample size sport and you just have to be better for a 4-quarter stretch, right? It's not baseball where you play 160 some of these things and you need top to bottom. You need to be better than the other team to win more games than the other team. In football, you just need to be better on that day. So I'm not saying the Packers couldn't beat the Eagles. They were close-ish twice. They were close to the first time in Brazil, for whatever that's worth. I'm not saying, man, if the Packers and Eagles play, how could they have a hope at winning? I'm not saying it's hopeless, but doesn't the gulf between the Packers roster and the Eagles roster, it feels pretty big, doesn't it? Eagles have better linebacker play, better defensive line play, better secondary, better wide receivers, better line, better running back. Maybe Tucker Kraft is slightly better than Dallas Goedert, but okay, now we're really splitting hairs. Who cares, right? How has Howie been able to do this? He's traded for studs like A.J. Brown, Darius Slay a couple of years ago. That's a legit player he acquired via trade. Signed Saquon, they utilized free agency as well. Drafted Devontae Smith, drafted Jalen Carter, drafted Cooper DeJean, drafted Quinyon Mitchell. And it's not like you say, well, Howie Roseman can do all that because they're not paying big money to their quarterback. Yeah, they are. And they're paying big money to their quarterback, who's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not prime Aaron Rodgers. He's Jalen Hurts. He's limited. They're paying Jalen Hurts big-time money because they have to. Not necessarily because that's what Jalen Hurts is worth, right? So you can't say, well, Howie has the flexibility to do this, that, and the other thing. He's not paying his quarterback. He is. He is paying his quarterback, just like the Packers are now paying their quarterback, right? Once upon a time, I couldn't get this out of my head on my drive home last night. The Eagles drafted Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. A miss like that is supposed to haunt a team. It's supposed to stick with a team. It still feels like the Packers have not recovered from not drafting TJ Watt. It feels that way. Some Packers people are like, oh my God, that's so dramatic. They maybe a little bit, but you know what I mean? Like, missing an opportunity to get a generational player like that is supposed to really hamper you. You're supposed to spend years thinking, man, I wish we would have, if only we could have, man, if only we could go back. Doesn't feel that way with the Eagles. Hell, like I said, he lit a 3rd-round pick on fire to roster Jahan Dotson. That's supposed to hurt. That's supposed to matter. And it doesn't with the Eagles. That roster is stacked. How is it that Howie has drafted better than the Packers, signed players who have been just as good as anybody the Packers have signed, traded aggressively, extended and paid aggressively, Howie's a good GM, but I think Brian Gutekunst is a GM, and yet he feels leagues behind. Brian Gutekunst is operating, or seems to be operating, like his ankles are in concrete and he's got weights around his wrists. Like he's so limited. Meanwhile, the Eagles are doing this, they're doing that. We're drafting this player in the first round. He's going to help us. We're going to trade for this player. He's going to help us. We're going to sign this free agent. He's going to help us. So enter Rob Domofsky, who wrote a story today at ESPN. You should read it. It's free. It's not behind a paywall at ESPN Plus. Titled, Packers Trusting in GM Gutekunst's Plan to Compete for a Super Bowl. I like Brian Gutekunst, right? You listen to the show. He's a fellow Eagle, fellow man of the WEAC. Love the guy. I don't go out of my way to dump on him. But here's a little bit of the story. Brian Gutekunst is a planner. Always has been. Just ask anyone who's worked with him since he joined the Green Bay Packers as a scouting intern in 97 or since he became the team general manager in 2018. Quote, some guys just throw blank on the board and think it's a plan, said an NFL personnel analyst who worked for the Packers in multiple capacities during Gutekunst's tenure. Quote, this is a clear plan. He has a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan. You could see that by the way he shaped the roster. This was merely year 2 of that plan. So far, it has resulted in back-to-back postseason appearances with no sign that this is the end, but rather another step on the way to getting the Packers back to a Super Bowl. I don't know if I'd frame it that way. I don't know. I think he's done a fine job. I think he's done a good job saying there's no signs that this is the end, but rather another step on the way to getting the Packers back to a Super Bowl. Okay, unless you think the Lions or the Vikings are going to take some major step back, or the Eagles, or the Rams, I don't know that I would editorial that way. Rob Domofsky knows more about football than me, so I'm not saying it's I think that's a little bit of a reach. That's not how I feel. I'm giving my commentary. It's my show. I like Rob's work. I have nothing against him. I'm just giving my commentary. Quote, we've got a bunch of good guys in that locker room. We've got a bunch of talented guys in that locker room. And I think it's time we started competing for championships. You heard that quote in the intro today, about 15 minutes ago. Gutekunst said following the Packers' NFC wildcard loss to Philly, quote, I think they're ready. The next step, according to Coach Matt LaFleur, is to shed the wildcard label and get back to winning the NFC North like they did in each of his first 3 seasons. Then it would mean they wouldn't have to open the playoffs on the road against a team like the Eagles. Quote, I think it just shows you back to the importance of getting these home field games, in my opinion. I think that's a little overblown. Winning in Philly is tough, but I don't know. Rodgers would say the same thing at the end. We got to get one of these at home. And then they got one at home and they couldn't do anything with it. They got 2 of them at home. They got a top seed twice. They couldn't do anything with it. So I don't know. Saying we got to get one of these at home. I think mostly that's just something you say when you lose a road playoff game. Well, much of the credit has gone to LaFleur, who has 5 playoff appearances in 6 seasons as head coach, and quarterbacks Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, who backed up Rodgers for the 3 years, turning in 2 seasons worthy of the franchise quarterback label. Gutekunst has worked in the background without many accolades, but those around the league have noticed. The way he's building the team is good, an assistant general manager with another team said. You won't hit on every player, but he has managed the team well. Maybe need one more impact player, but those are hard to just go find. It's not as simple as just finding an impact player. I agree. But I look at some of the choices in the draft. Again, first round pick after first round pick after first round pick, where it's like, you could have done better there. Could have done better there. Could have done better there. Could have found someone there who would have helped you early and helped you more often. Could have found someone there that would have helped you contend right away and also been a nice player on the stretch. This is why I don't like the draft takes that you hear a lot. They're like, well, the draft isn't for the here and now. It's for the future. And I always say, why not both? Do you think Jared Verse is all of a sudden going to start sucking next year? No, he was awesome as a rookie. I think he'll probably remain awesome. Maybe even get better. Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell. Well, the draft isn't for the here and now. Well, I think the Eagles view it as, hey, these guys are helping us win now, and they're young. They're going to continue to be good. It's not like you need to draft a limited player in the first round to get a good player later. It can be both, right? That quote again, the way he's building the team is good, an assistant GM with another team said. You won't hit on every player, but he has managed the team well. Maybe need one more impact player, but those are just hard to go find. I think they need more than one more impact player. I think they need a little bit more than that. I don't think they're miles away. I take a little bit of an issue. I have no problem with Rob in the story. I take a little bit of an issue with Gutey's doing what he should do. He's building in year 2. Now we're into year 3. He's doing that. And then I look at the Eagles. It's like, okay, so what are they doing? You know what I mean? What's their year one, year two, phase one, phase two, plan A, plan B. It looks to me that the Eagles are just all in on winning every year. And they're not in salary cap hell like the Saints. They're not completely deprived of draft picks like the Rams were once upon a time. Like, that's the team I'm looking at. It's like, okay, so Gutey tells me he has a plan, building a young team. We're in year two. Really, this is going to culminate in year three. Okay. But then what are the Eagles doing? What are the Rams doing? Some of the players they added in the draft. And this isn't necessarily just criticism of the Jordan Morgan pick, although he didn't do anything for them this year. Well, Granny was hurt. Okay, if he was healthy and played well, he would have been part of an offensive line that was already pretty good. Now, I don't mind the depth moving forward, and I'm never gonna criticize a general manager for adding to the O-line. Because I think the first thing that people will line up to do is criticize the general manager that doesn't build the O-line. So I'm not going to rip him for going O-line. But, man, you're up against that stacked roster in Philly. You're up against that uber-talented roster in Minnesota, that juggernaut that's been built in Detroit. I understand that, building a contender is not as simple as go spend all the money, trade all the picks, go get all the players. I understand it's not that simple, but I don't know that it's necessarily as diabolical and as planned and as spreadsheeted as Brian Gutekunst and the Packers have made it. I don't know. I need to see a little bit more. I think Gutey's done a fine job. I think he has missed on players in spots where he had other options to get players that really could have helped in the here and now and in the future. Good players will probably stay good. They'll probably get even better. And some of these first-round picks, we've talked a lot about it on Bill's show. It's like, man, imagine if that player would have been an impact player, makes a difference here and there in a game or two. And I was fighting with Bukowski on Twitter earlier because it's fun to fight with Bukowski on Twitter. And he's like, well, Brenton Cox was great. But because he wasn't a first-round pick, Gutey doesn't get credit for that? Well, no. What if you get Brenton Cox in the 7th round or whatever, and then you also draft a good player in the first? Imagine both. Imagine getting both. Now we're talking about a roster that is stacked. So I want to talk more about this. I want to talk about the idea that Brian Gutekunst has a plan and he's building it. Okay, I'm all for a plan, but I look at some of these other teams who just seemingly are operating like we're going to try to be as good as possible. Every year is a Super Bowl year for us. And it seems to be working a little bit better for those other teams. Eagles have now been, to 3 Super Bowls since the Packers have been to their last one? I'm not saying that what the Packers are doing is a complete and total, exercise in futility, but I when I see stories, it's like, Gutey's doing it right. Okay, well, let's hope. I hope next year is the year that it all comes together, but I look over the last 2 years and I see some missed opportunities. That's all. We got loaded phone lines. We'll get to your calls, talk more Packers, and Brian Gutekunst next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
The Wisco Sports Show began by talking a little bit about the job Brian Gutekunst has done building this team the last 2 years. Rob Demoski with a good story, with some quotes from people who have worked in and around the Packers, in and around the NFL the last couple of years, saying Gutey's got a plan. He's doing it right. He's got this figured out year 1 to year 2 to year 3. And I like Brian Gutekunst. I think he's done a good job. I can look around the NFL and think, well, there's a team or there's a general manager that's not so focused or obsessed with the idea of year 1 versus year 2 versus year 3, just trying to win a Super Bowl. And we have an opportunity to get a great player here in the draft or in a trade or in free agency. We're going to do it. And a team like the Eagles now are going back to Super Bowl number 3 since the Packers have been to a Super Bowl. And their quarterback was Nick Foles. Jalen Hurts was limited, not really a good passer. Can't say they're not paying him this time. They are. Hasn't stopped him. So I just look at it side-eyed a little bit. I think Gutey's done a good job. But I don't know. Is this a moment in time to write long, sweeping, congratulatory pieces about his process? I don't know. That's where maybe I push back a little bit. Nothing against Demoski. It's just a point for us to begin the show tonight. Talk a little Packers and team building. We'll get to the Brewers, the Bucks maybe later on in the show. And I have some hilarious Jerry Jones audio that we're just going to have fun with. 608-321-1670 to the phones. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, how we doing? Happy Tuesday.
Vagabond. Excellent. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, I got a question for you. Talking about the Eagles roster building.
Yeah.
4 players. What do they all have in common? Jalen Carter, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, and Cooper DeJean. What do they all have in common?
I don't know.
They all came from the Carson Wentz trade.
Oh.
And you're talking about the Rams, and you could throw the Lions in there. What these teams have done is they didn't play scared at the table. They put their chips into the middle of the table. The Lions obviously sending Matthew Stafford to the Rams. The Rams doing a counter, and that was kind of a rare win-win where obviously the Rams got their Super Bowl. The Lions got like 9 players. It ended up being from those draft picks. And this goes back to Vagabond John's calls in 2022 when I said, do we really think old Aaron Rodgers, old Devontae Adams, injured David Bakhtiari, running it back, is it really going to be worth it? And all summer long, I said, these guys are absolute idiots not to cash in now on the 3-4 first-round picks, whatever you're going to get for Aaron Rodgers. Instead, they waited that year. They missed the playoffs, and they didn't get their chance. So all the teams that you're listing right now, and you could throw a couple others in there, they made a big move with a big-time player and took a huge risk to gain a ton of draft assets. You throw in the Rams as well. They also drafted in the top 10 a lot. The Eagles have picked in the top 10 a ton. Mm-hmm. The Packers simply haven't because they haven't acquired the capital. So 2 things. The Packers haven't sucked enough to get into the top 10 like the 49ers did all through the 20 teens. All those top 5 picks on defense, right? And when they had opportunities to really pull the trigger and make the move, they held on to the stock a little too long and missed out on an Eagles-type haul. Again, for Carson Wentz, you got Jalen Carter, top 10 pick.
Explain to me Carson Wentz stung. Explain to me how where are you getting this? The point is good, and I want to continue to talk about the point. But just so I understand what you're saying, the Carson Wentz trade. What do you mean by that?
So when they
when the Rams, don't you mean when the Rams jumped up to get Jared Goff? Is that what you mean?
No. I'm talking about when the Eagles sent Carson Wentz to the Colts. They got a bunch of picks. They got 2 first-round picks for Carson Wentz. This is why, when you look back in hindsight and you talk about the Aaron Rodgers situation, quarterbacks that sucked were going for so much. They got a 22 first-round pick, a 23 first-round pick, a 24 first-round pick, which they traded up for Cooper DeJean with, right? So they got a ton of draft capital, and that's why there were some smart Packer fans pounding the table like, look, guys, if Carson Wentz is going for multiple first-round picks, to not trade Aaron Rodgers in that moment absolutely cursed the Packers, and I think that's the single biggest thing that's keeping them keeping their ceiling low. And I think what the Eagles did, they swindled the Colts, and they turned it around. And to your point, they capitalized on it. But a lot of those picks came in the top 10, not at like number 20, which the Packers seem to be stuck at forever. So I think that's the big move that they missed.
And that's a good call, and that further adds to the discussion. It gives us some things to talk about. So if you think that the Packers should have traded Aaron Rodgers a year before they did, fine. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm fine that the Packers held on one more year because I don't think they believed in love. Rodgers had just won an MVP. We can agree to disagree. I don't care. The difference of a year or two is maybe a difference of a first-round pick. Okay, sure. But they got a bounty of picks for Rodgers and a bounty of picks for Adams. They didn't do anything with them. They used those extra firsts and seconds to draft another player from Georgia who's rotational at best. And they packaged another one of those picks to jump up to draft Christian Watson, who has been Christian Watson, who at times has been excellent. But they know Devontae Smith. It's no Jalen Carter. I know those picks were higher, but okay, where was Lucas Van Ness drafted? He was top 15 so far. So they could have had more picks. Why? So they could have drafted more backups from Georgia? Like they could have had more picks. I agree. Nothing from the sample size of Brian Gutekunst that we had so far makes me think, man, if he had only had more picks, he would have drafted more players who were all pro level. I just don't believe that's true. So then we're just talking about a question. Quantity of picks, not quality of picks. And I don't really care that they held on to Rodgers for another year. But your point, Vagabond John, is a good one, and it helps us further this discussion. So thank you. Let's take another call. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
I apologize about the noise. I'm currently at West Ave, but this is Thomas in La Crosse. Happy Tuesday.
West Ave, the windiest place in the northern hemisphere. I don't know about Antarctica. It's a wind tunnel on West Ave.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm going to do my best to kind of muffle it out.
Sure.
But
What do you
I'll be
think?
out of West Ave here. So yeah, I got two things for you.
Mhm.
First one, and then I have a question of the day that I want your response to. First, Gutey. I'm kind of biased since I go to UWL. I'm gonna say he's mid, to use a Gen Z term. He's mid. I did like drafting the wide receivers. However, Grant Bills, Christian Watson, he could not stay on the field. And Maliki and the Wicks, I suppose. But some of the picks,
I suppose.
Ooh.
Well, I tell you what, Thomas, walk safe on West Ave. Watson is, I don't want to go back and relitigate. It's not my goal today to go back and relitigate picks. That's not necessarily my goal here. Now, some of these first round picks, because they're always brought up, we kind of need to relitigate them. I don't want to necessarily get into the third and fourth round where it's like, well, Jay Sternberg over Terry McLaurin. You'd love to have that pick back, but I'm not all these years later going to go back and look again at second and third round picks. First round picks, sure. I just, back to Vagabond John's point and to what Thomas and La Crosse said, like, I think Gutey's done a good job. I don't think it's been a lack of picks or resources. I just don't know that they've been as aggressive as some of these other teams. And that's not packaging multiple firsts. You know what I mean? To go get a star. It's not, I know you can't trade every pick and you can't spend every dollar. When I read about the Packers and their process, it's very year one, year two, phase one, phase two, plan A, plan B. And then I just watch these other teams. They're like, no, we have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl this year. So we're just going to do everything we can to round out this roster and have difference makers everywhere. And I don't know that some of these other teams have the governors that the Packers place on themselves, artificial or real, right? It doesn't matter. The Packers have seemed to have a plan they're following. And I think the Eagles are more like, well, it's a really good player and we can get him. So we're going to trade, free agency, draft. We're just going to acquire as much talent as possible. And we're going to try to win this year. We're going to try to win next year. We're going to try to win the year after. It's just how some other teams are doing it. One more call, then we'll take a break. Let's go Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant, it's Corey. How
Hey,
you
Corey.
doing?
I'm doing
Marshall.
good. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I hear what you're saying here, and I get a kick out when you say you don't want to relitigate picks. That's Packers fans' favorite thing to do in the world is relitigate past glory years. But I will try to make my point quick here. So when you mentioned about other teams just kind of going for it and being able to do whatever they want to do. Packers have been hamstrung. I think you live in reality, so you can realize that they made that poor decision to extend Rodgers, a lot of dead cap. They're still paying money to Vonnery Campbell this year, and I think Preston Smith last year they were still kind of in a cap hell. This year will be the first one they actually got some money. So that's a bit of a specious argument. I got to be honest with you to say, well, these other teams just gone out and done what they want to do well.
I don't think their limit.
Enough man, he would have done that.
Their limit is in spending. They were able to go get Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. I think the free agency ads, those were the best moves that were made this offseason.
Yeah. And they made because they were able to finally do that this offseason.
Okay. Yeah.
They finally cleared some salary cap off the books.
Sure.
And they made mistakes in drafting. I'll give you that. And waiting and thinking Eric Stokes was going to be okay after he destroyed his legs. They should have taken Quinyon Mitchell, but they didn't. So
I'm shocked. By the way, I'm shocked, and I remain shocked. I've been on the record since the beginning of the year. I'm shocked that Eric Stokes was as good as he was this year, and he sucked.
That's true.
I'm shocked that they got what they got from him. And betting on anything more was insane to me, and I don't often plant my flag, but I was saying that back in February. I'm like, you can't bet on this guy. And they did, and he actually played better than he should have. They got more than they deserved from Eric Stokes this year.
I agree. So I got one last question for you, Grant. So there's a 5-year plan. Wouldn't he really be in like the 5th-year plan right now? And the other thing I wonder from that is part of the plan being neutered by your general manager 5 years ago when they brought in Matt LaFleur? Because remember, they went to the triangle of power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Decision-making tree. So those are some things I just bring up as counterpoints.
Great points.
Moving forward, we'll see what they're going to do because, like you said, if you're going to have a sense of urgency, well, signing Rich Bisaccia to a extension contract or whatever doesn't really make much sense to me. But I don't think Gutey is the one pulling all the strings back there. So that's my 2 cents.
I'm going to second guess the Rich Bisaccia extension. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I'm not bogged down in that. I'm not bogged down in them bringing back Luke Getsy. Whatever. He was successful here. Oh, Gutey and LaFleur, they're only hiring friends. Man, the whole league, they're all friends. You know what I mean? I like new ideas coming in. They're going to get someone with new ideas. We assume on the defensive line, they're going to make other additions. I'm not really bogged down in that stuff. And I'm not really bogged down in the salary cap stuff. I think we all understand that. They were able to sign Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. I think they did a great job there. It seems to me that there are other opportunities, be it in the draft, to just make a consensus pick. Other opportunities in trade markets. And that's really where I'm interested this offseason. Can you package a pick to go get a guy? You know what I mean? And by the way, Vagabond John, I looked it up. They got a 3rd and a conditional 1st for Carson Wentz. There was talk of multiple firsts. The Packers got more for Devontae Adams than the Eagles got for Carson Wentz. And the Packers did, to my point, not a lot with those picks. So I don't think it's a matter of they should have gotten more picks. I think they should have done better with the picks they had. I'm not interested in going to relitigate. They had opportunities chipping away Rodgers and Adams to really get some studs. They got fine players. They didn't get studs, the likes of which the Eagles and Howie Roseman drafted. More of your thoughts on this. I'll get to some texts as well. The Wisco Sports Show. Got to take a break.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
And I'm assuming you're talking about a player, like a veteran player, right? Yeah. When you trade a high pick for a veteran player, you're trading a young, really good contract for a player who's proven, but probably expensive. So you're giving up a pick in salary cap space. So I think you gotta weigh that. And if it's the right player, if you feel he can be a dynamic player that can change your football team, I think you got to consider that because there's not many of those guys out there. But I think you have to also understand what you're giving up, and so that's kind of my fault. We haven't really, I'm trying to think how many times we've done that around here, so yeah. I mean, there was one back in Favre, right? I mean, they traded a first round pick for him, right? I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think if there's. I'm drawing a blank, but I'm trying to think if we've traded any first round picks since I've been here for a player. Again, but it doesn't happen a lot at all. But we've gotten some first round picks for players. But yeah, I mean, certainly if that player can impact our football team in a significant way, you have to consider that.
They did get multiple firsts, or a first for Davante Adams, a first and a second. And when we originally played that cut a couple of weeks ago, I don't know why the Davante Adams trade wasn't coming to mind. I'm like, who have they traded to get first round picks? And everyone in the comments on YouTube and Facebook's like, Adams. Like, who was it? Oh, Davante Adams. They had 2 first round picks in the 2022 draft, one of them from Adams. They went Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt. Quay Walker's been fine. Wyatt's had moments, right? No different than players they've gotten later in the draft. And they used that extra pick in the second round to jump up and get Christian Watson, who I think overall has been fine. Some bad moments, lots of good moments, and then injuries. Now he's not going to be available next year. I'm not blaming him personally for that. I'm just evaluating the player. So in the past, the Packers have had extra picks, extra first, extra second. I think back to was it the 2019 draft? Where they went, no, it wouldn't have been the 2019 draft. What year did they go? 18. They went Rashawn Gary and Darnell Savage Jr., right? 2018 NFL draft. That was 18. They had an extra first that year because of the pick from the year before. When they moved back, they allowed the Saints to move up to get Marcus Davenport, which was smart. And then they used the second round pick on Darnell Savage Jr., who was fine. Not a game breaker, not a game wrecker. The 2019 NFL draft. The 2018 draft was Jair Alexander. And let's look at the picks here. Another instance where they had an extra first. And this is being discussed. We're talking about this because I, at the beginning of the show, compared Brian Gutekunst and the job that he's done to the job that Howie Roseman has done. Rival executive in the NFC, done a very good job team building. In fact, I look at the Eagles, I don't know what their weakness is. Elite players all over the place. Been acquired through the draft, trades, free agency, all of it. They're paying their quarterback, hasn't stopped him. And I'm told, well, Gutey's got a plan. Year one, year two. In fact, Cone Roller texted in 608-321-1670. God laughs when people plan. Instead of a 3 or 5 year plan, why don't we just try to compete every year? I don't know. That's kind of what I'm hinting at. And Cone, you understand, like I understand. You can't spend all the money every year. You can't trade all the picks every year. Just seems like we've put a governor on this thing when maybe a governor isn't required. The 2019 NFL draft, the Packers had 2 picks. They go Rashawn Gary at 12. He's been good to very good. Not been great. He's been good. And anytime I say something like this, Bukowski or the like is on Twitter, we've got a pressure percentage of guys. I watch the games. I have eyes. Okay. Stop throwing the numbers. Bukowski before the show, because I've been fighting him on Twitter all day, is like, well, Brenton Cox got a 10% pressure rate. Stop it. Stop it. Put your calculators away. Put your spreadsheets away. Their second first round pick in the 2019 NFL draft was, and now I'm trying to find it. What pick did he go? They took Darnell Savage. They jumped up to get him. Like I just, or do I have the draft wrong? You guys know what I'm talking about. Darnell Savage and was the later of the first round pick in that year, but now I'm failing to remember which draft that was in. My point, which I'm making poorly, they've had extra picks before. Vagabond John says, well, the Eagles have had extra picks. The Packers should have traded Rodgers sooner. Well, they had an extra pick from Rodgers. They had 2 extra picks from Devontae Adams. Maybe that's not 3 extra picks, but they had a pick here, 2 picks there. My point is they haven't really done a whole lot with him. Yeah, Darnell Savage went 21st overall. Couple picks in front of Josh Jacobs, interestingly enough, who now is a Packer. And remember, they moved up. They gave up a 4th, I believe, to go back up a little bit closer to get Darnell Savage. So it's not been a lack of picks. They've had extra picks. It's not a lack of money. They had money this year. They went and got Josh Jacobs, who went a couple picks after Darnell Savage. And they got Xavier McKinney, who've been great. I don't know. When I start reading a story from Rob Domofsky, it's like Gutey's got a plan and everyone on the league is respecting it so much. It's like, okay, but is the top speed of this plan, is the end goal of this plan going to put them above the Vikings or the Lions or the Eagles? I don't know. I'm a little skeptical. It's not doing that right now, but I'm being told, well, that's the plan. Okay, well, where's this plan going to end up? What are we planning? What's in store next year or the year after? Because it better be pretty great. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant, Matt, and Cross Plains.
Hey, Matt and Cross Plains. Hey, what do you think of the Ryan Presley edition?
Sure, why not? I like it. I'll see him in Arizona in March. Are you going to Arizona this March?
No, I'm not going. I'm not going this year because there's too much going on. Got to go to the Super Bowl. I might end up at the Combine. It's too much, too busy, which is a bummer.
Draft, too? Probably the NFL draft?
I don't know. I probably won't go to the draft. Bill might, but we'll probably do some extra stuff for the draft. It's just very busy. I got a couple weddings, one of which I got to travel for. It's boring and you don't care. But no spring training.
Yeah, the whole point with Gutekunst here is, like, I don't know why. It just seems like he's just scared to, like, make one wrong decision. For instance, I'll go back to this season when there was all the Max Crosby talk. I mean, that should have been something that we should have just done to help shore up the defense. And, I think if the Packers go out and get a T. Higgins, that would be great this offseason somehow, too. And then I think they got to follow your philosophy and draft as many athletic cornerbacks that they can. I don't know why they're so worried. Yeah, that too. But I just don't know why they're so worried, or he's so worried. It seems like that one first round draft pick in 2027 is going to ruin, the team. So that's what's really frustrating to most Packer fans, I think, especially when you've had 30 plus years of, great to MVP to now Jordan Love quarterback play, right?
You've had competitive teams, put it that way. You've been in the mix a lot for the better part of 30 years, whether that's quarterback driven or roster driven, whatever the reason, you've been close a lot.
Yeah, the franchise is solid, so I don't think trading away a couple draft picks here and there. I mean, obviously you can't do it every year, like you were just saying, and you can't throw money at everybody every year because of, cap hits and stuff like that. But you just got to pick your year, and I think this year would have been a great year to do it, but he chose not to. So I guess we'll see what happens. I guess if this is year 3 of the Jordan Love plan, right? Because next year will be his 3rd year as a starter. So I guess we'll see what he does in the draft, and I pray to God he gets a number 1 wide receiver. Even though we have all these good receivers, I think we need a stud who stands out. So.
Yeah.
That's my take.
No, and that's a good take. To push back a little bit, I don't know that Max Crosby was out there to be had. I don't know that the Raiders were shopping him in the Packers. Like, no thanks. And I'm still skeptical that they're going to shop him. Matt Berry, whatever his name is, the Browns general manager said today, is it the Senior Bowl right now? I think the Senior Bowl just started. We just had the Shrine Bowl. I think now it's a Senior Bowl. So sometimes you'll have execs or scouts or general managers themselves, in the case of Barry, making statements. And he's like, we're not trading Myles Garrett, which could change in a month. But he's talking about it, right? He said something today. And we haven't heard anything from the Raiders. John Spytek just took over as the general manager. I would probably bet against Max Crosby coming available. But, man, that's one you'd have to look into. I want to play you this cut from Pete Doherty again. This is 2 weeks ago on the Bill Michaels show. Pete is conservative and is mellow. And, I mean, he's not rocking the boat, saying the Packers are stupid for this, that, and the other thing. Here he is talking about the potential of making a big swing and going for it, trying to put your stamp on this thing, and why Max Crosby might be the player this year. Might.
You get a difference maker. Everybody gets better on the defense. That's the whole thing. They could do it any of those ways. I mean, it's really hard to do in one draft, and you got to, to get that help immediately. Now, the Rams did it this year, right, with Verse and Fisk. I mean, those are 2 really good pass rushers. So it can be done. And if the Packers could draft 2 guys like that, I mean, man, they're in business. But that's pretty tough to pull off. I argued this week, I did a column, and I argued, look, I'm not big on, going out and all these trades, people go trade for this guy, trade for that. That stuff just doesn't work. But I think if Max Crosby is available, I would take a really hard run at that if I were the Packers. He's still just young enough. He's 27, so he turns 28 in August. He's just young enough where I think it would be realistic to think they could get 3 very good years out of him. And so I talked to a personnel guy in the league. He thought a 1 this year and a 2 next year might get it done. Maybe they'd have to flip-flop some other picks to the Raiders' advantage too. But if that were the price, man, I would have a hard time not doing it if I were the Packers. There's a risk there, but I would have a hard time not doing it.
I'd do it tomorrow for a first and a future second if you could break it up between 2 years. Because, again, what are these firsts? I mean, the last game breaker they drafted in the first round was Jair, who was excellent. And then he started, having problems staying on the field. Let's take a call, then we'll take a break. Let's go Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant.
Hey, Tony.
Tony from Texas.
Yeah, what's going on?
First of all, how's Clemhead? I haven't heard the show. Is Clemhead all right?
Clemhead's doing good. Fun moment from him yesterday, just taking a big old dump on his father, who apparently he didn't like.
I'll pray for him. I think we all should. Talking about the Packers, and I don't think it's necessarily the amount of draft picks or what they're doing. I think it's the evaluation. You look at certain positions, for whatever reason, we talk about a Van Ness and a Gary. It's like they look at their size and their speed, but they don't look at productivity on the field. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And they're looking at certain traits, and for whatever reason, that's not translating to the NFL game. When I watch the games, you can, like you said, you can bring up all these pressure rates, all that stuff. We watch the games. They're not impact players. Reggie White, I believe, was about 32 years old when he was signed as a free agent as a Packer. Can you imagine that? 32 years old. He was the highest paid defensive end. highest paid defensive player. Is that guy out there right now? Is Max Crosby that guy? If you believe he's that type of player, an NFL Hall of Famer, then you got to make that deal. You got to go sign that player or trade for that player. That's my opinion. What do you think about that?
No, I think it's fine. Maybe the better comparison for Reggie White, not in caliber of player, but in age and stage of career, is Khalil Mack, who's probably going to be available, it would seem, as an undrafted free agent this offseason. That would maybe more fit the Julius Peppers edition that they made back in 2014. If I'm Brian Gutey, and I don't mean to turn this into the Max Crosby show, that wasn't really my intention. We're just kind of talking about the job that Gutey has done relative to some of their rivals. But one of these off seasons, Gutey, don't you feel like you got to take a shot at your legacy here, man? You know what I mean? Swinging a move that swings a title back to Green Bay for the first time now and going on 15 years. It's got to be something that he thinks about. And I know he's got a plan. That's where we started talking about today, right? Rob Demovsky talking about writing a story about this plan. First year, now you're in year 2. Now it's really going to culminate in year 3. Well, it better culminate in a big way, because this isn't good enough. It's not bad. What they're doing isn't bad. It's not on the level of some of the other teams. How are you going to get past the Lions, the Vikings, the Eagles, the Rams, who I don't think are going anywhere, right? I question if the culmination of this plan, we're told in year 3, I question if that'll be enough, which is why I might be with Cone. Like, every year you're trying to win a Super Bowl. It's how it works. Any chance to get better, any chance to add a difference maker, you take. All right, 3 minutes. We'll wrap up hour number 1. Next, I'll give you some fun Jerry Jones audio before we get to 5 o'clock. That's coming up next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Now, I get my proverbial ass kicked over needing people in my comfort zone. Without this thing being about me in any way, if you don't think I can't operate out of my comfort zone, you're so wrong. It's unbelievable. This is as big a risk as you could take. As big a risk as you could take. No head coaching experience. Now, let me share something with you. With all of that, you've just heard him reference his osmosis, his family. Anybody in this room that doesn't believe the apple doesn't go far from the tree has missed it someplace down the road, especially if there was an effort to make it that way, and there was an effort. But then you go around to the countless numbers of coaches that Gutey has served on staff with and been around, the countless players. How often do you have someone that has 25, I'm going to say 25, it may be 26, of years of working through the human relationship and working, aspiring to learn, of have his ears and eyes wide open and looking for techniques and looking for things that make coaches better.
It's a little bit of Jerry Jones, Brian Schottenheimer, Schotty, his introductory press conference yesterday. I have some more clips. They're kind of fun. I'll mix them into the show in hour number 2. Bill earlier today, because we played a lot of this audio, was like, I feel bad for Jerry. It's embarrassing. I don't feel bad for Jerry. He loves this. Maybe he's a little old. There's a little dementia, maybe. But it's not like Jerry Jones is suffering up there at that table. He's like a dog with his head stuck out the window. This is his favorite thing to do. Give him a mic. Let him talk about the history of football and when he bought the Dallas Cowboys. I don't feel bad for him. He's loving it. And therefore, I'm going to love it too. This is uber entertaining. This is Jerry Jones at his best. So I have a couple more hilarious comments. I'll continue to mix them into the show, but we got to take a break. 2 minutes. Update from Zach Heilpern, and we'll reset the show. Our number 2 next.
When up pops the white, I said I can't fight. Nothing wrong with being friends, 'cause sometimes
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, the Bucs are in Portland. It's where they're going to take on the Trailblazers tonight. Third game of a 4-game road trip for the club. They're 1-1 so far, losing in L.A. to the Clippers on Saturday before taking down the Jazz last night. Tip tonight is at 9. Meanwhile, the NBA trade deadline is fast approaching. It's a week from Thursday. Milwaukee reportedly trying to make a significant move to bolster the roster around Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard. Turning to the Badgers, they're making their way to Maryland today. That's where they'll face the Terrapins tomorrow night. They will do so with the combo of John Blackwell and John Tonji leading the way offensively. Both are averaging better than 16 points per game. First time a Wisconsin team has had 2 players scoring more than 16 a game since 2010, 2011. Coach Greg Gard says it's coming naturally.
You know, a byproduct of having a team that can really score. You can't zero in on 1 or 2 guys. They're opportunistic. And I think we don't come into it with a predetermined mindset that player A, B, or C has to get so many shots. It happens. You take what the defense gives you and you try to put players in position of their strengths.
Wisconsin sitting at 16-4 in the year, 6-3 in Big Ten play. They moved up 1 spot in the AP poll to number 17 yesterday.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Rural Mutual is the #1 farm insurer in Wisconsin for a good reason. As a company founded by farmers, they understand the ag industry and its challenges. Local agents offer farm families the best advice and personalized coverage. Visit ruralmutual.com to find an agent near you.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, Rich Bisaccia is sticking around Green Bay. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reported he got a contract extension. Also, Luke Gutey returning to Green Bay as a special assistant. He was last with the club as the QB coach and passing game coordinator back in 2021. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heilprin.
Anybody in this room that doesn't believe the apple doesn't go far from the tree has missed it someplace down the road, especially if there was an effort to make it that way, and there was an effort.
We need to continue to ramp up our sense of urgency. The life of a player in the National Football League is not very long. We got a bunch of good guys in that locker room. We got a bunch of talented guys in that locker room, and it's time that we start competing for championships, right?
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
We've been talking about Brian Gutekunst, the job that he's doing, the plan that he is exacting. Is that the correct word to use? You get my point, right? The plan that he's following, the steps that he's following. Rob Domofsky with a good story out at ESPN today with quotes from people that have worked with Gutekunst and Gutekunst. I accidentally said it like McAfee there. People that have worked with Gutekunst and people who work around the league. You say, that guy's doing it right. He's doing it smart. You can see that he's got a plan and he's sticking to it. And I think that's true. I think that's commendable. But then I look at what the Lions have done and what the Eagles have done. And, you know, it was hard to walk away from this last draft, this previous draft, thinking, yeah, I like what the Packers did, but I don't know if it's as good as what these other teams have done. Especially when you consider, you know, the Eagles, I keep using the Eagles as the gold standard, right? They have knocked trades out of the park. They've knocked free agency out of the park. They've knocked the draft out of the park. And you can't say, well, sure, it's easy to sign guys and make trades when you're not paying your quarterback. They're paying their quarterback, right? Jalen Hurts was extended 2 off seasons ago now. So you can't use that as an excuse. I think Gutey's done a good job. I'm going to stop a little short of writing the long narrative piece about how he's got a plan and he's doing it right. And maybe the Packers look like a wagon next year and Gutey's got aces up his sleeves and his pants for this offseason. Now it's year 3 and now it's go time, as his, you know, championships comment would indicate. And, you know, it's time to get serious about winning champions. Oh, okay. As of right now, it does not feel like they're on a fast track in year 3 to pass by the Lions or to pass by the Eagles or even a team like the Rams. You know what I mean? And next year's going to be a tough test because they got to play the quarterbacks from the AFC North. You have to see Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson and whoever the Browns roll out, I guess, and whoever the Steelers decide to. Probably Aaron Rodgers at this point. Them are the Colts. I think Jets should keep him. We talked about that earlier on Bill's show. We don't need to get into that. But next year's going to be a stiffer test. Packers got some luck with their scheduling this year. They played the AFC South. I don't take away their 11 wins. I think they took a nice step in year 2 in some ways. I think their coach took a step back. As I said, I think their quarterback took a step back. Some of that explainable, some of it not. I'm a little skeptical that, well, Gutey is exacting or implementing his plan, and year 3 is the year, so next year is the year it's all going to pop. Okay, maybe. I just don't feel super confident about that right now. So when I see a story from Domofsky written about that, nothing against Domofsky, we're going to pick at it a little bit, right? We're going to discuss it. If you have more thoughts on this, we can continue to talk Packers. I have a Brewers thought before the end of the show as well, and I want to mix in some of this Jerry Jones audio because it's just so incredible. And this quote, I know exactly what he's trying to say, but the ways in which, you know, the folksy delivery and this is just so
Anybody
good.
in this room that doesn't believe the apple doesn't go far from the tree has missed it someplace down the road, especially if there was an effort to make it that way, and there was an effort.
What he's saying is Brian Schottenheimer was raised in a coaching family. He's been a coach his entire life. So if you don't think the apple falls far from the tree, let me tell you, buddy, you missed the apple along the road, especially if there was an effort to make it that way, and there was an effort. He's saying there was an intention. It was intentional the way that the Schottenheimer family raised him as a coach. Like they were intentionally trying to make him a coach. It's not just that he was born to coaches. There was intention. There was not intentionality. There was purpose behind it, right? But instead, it just comes out as a folksy word salad.
Anybody in this room that doesn't believe the apple doesn't go far from the tree has missed it someplace down the road, especially if there was an effort to make it that way, and there was an effort.
Oh, my God. And by the way, I see all these comments. Bill brought this up earlier today. I'll get to the phones. Give me 30 seconds. I saw all these people on Twitter. This is just sad. You know, I feel bad for Jerry. This is embarrassing. Man, do you think this guy gets embarrassed? And also, he's having the time of his life. It's not like they wheeled him out there and are propping him up. Jerry Jones exploded out of bed yesterday morning. He hasn't been excited to do anything the way that he was excited to do that yesterday. He is like a dog with his head stuck out the window. Is he a little old? Maybe losing some marbles? Sure. But he's not embarrassed by that. He had the time of his life yesterday. He's having a ball up there at the podium with the microphone in his hand. So I am going to enjoy his folksy delivery. And another thing, so many football people, another 30 seconds, and then I'll get to the phones. All these people around the league. Jerry Jones is ruining that franchise. Jerry Jones is a Met. Can we just appreciate the entertainment value? I mean, there's lots of bad owners in the NFL. Jerry Jones might not be the best owner, but I feel pretty confident that he's not the worst. And I think part of the fun of sports is these crazy egos, these people who are in charge, who are these personalities, right? Like Jerry, there's a certain entertainment value there. I appreciate it. It makes for good audio. It gives us something to talk about, gives us something to react to in a week in which we have no NFL football to look forward to because we have a bye week this upcoming weekend before the Super Bowl. So I'm enjoying it. I like his folksy delivery. And you know what? I'm pulling for Shoddy. I hope he's great. I'm no Cowboys fan, but I don't know. There's something endearing. There's something endearing about an organization that brings in billions of dollars that's run like the general store in the town of 200 people. And that's kind of what the Cowboys are. $1 billion business run like the mom pop store. Just right off the train tracks on the main drag. Like, there's something very funny about that, and you really only get that in professional sports. All right, to your call, 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Eric on I-90.
Eric on I-90. Good evening, Eric. Do you agree with me on Jerry? I mean, he's entertaining as hell. Come on.
I do agree with you.
He's funny.
I think he doesn't care.
No.
At all. Obviously, he doesn't care what the fans think. He's been cared for years.
No.
He doesn't care. Why would he care?
I loved,
Why would he care?
I loved, I'll play you this comment in a bit. I love that he's like, people say I don't step outside my comfort zone. Look, I hired this guy who's got no experience. Is almost, he's saying like, you guys don't think that I won't take a risk. Look at this risk. This guy's sitting next to me. He's probably going to suck. He's never been a head coach before. It's just the whole, the whole thing, his reasoning, the pageantry, I'll play you more audio. It's just awesome. And it makes me laugh.
Right. He's genetically engineered to be a coach. Was his mom a coach?
I don't know about Miss Schottenheimer.
Right? I mean, did they go all the way back to the breeding of this kid and find out what his hierarchy is?
Yeah, I don't
that
know.
apple fell close to the tree.
Yeah.
All right.
Wouldn't it be the apple fell close to the tree or didn't fall far from the tree? Yeah, same thing, I guess.
Right. Right. You know, I do like that audio, and but I'm sensing from you now, there's a sense of, disparity. I don't know if you guys are believers in the 3-ring binder passed down from Ron Wolf to Gutey. He's supposed to follow this 3-ring binder. Remember the 3-ring binder? You talked about it. The 3-ring binder passed down.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I'm sensing that you guys aren't believing in that now.
Well, no, I think the Packers, the way in which they're married to their process and they have a structure that they follow, I think, and Eric, you might agree with this, in business or in life, routine keeps you focused. There's a certain freedom you get from a routine, right? When you've set a routine or when you've figured out your schedule, now all I have to do is just live my life. Everything's, set up. No, I think the 3-ring binder and the process that started with Wolf, I think that keeps an organization stable. And I think it keeps it healthy. I just wonder if this 3-ring binder is ever going to get them over the top. You know what I mean? I don't think they're ever going to be bad operating like this. I just wonder, Gutey talks about getting back to another Super Bowl. How are you going to do that? Because look at the Lions, look at the Rams, look at the Eagles.
I think we got to look at the 3-ring binder that the Washington Redskins used, because they were a pile of steeping, burning dumpster fire 2 years ago. And look at them now.
Yeah. Couple of strategic signings. They with Dan Quinn, very similar to what happened with your Vikings. Dan Quinn comes in and he brings along, Dante Fowler Jr. and some other good players who he's coached in the past. So you get a little bump, I think, when you bring in a new coach, especially a defensive guy like that. I don't know. I think the Commanders will be very, very good. I'm interested to see Jaden Daniels as his career progresses, because we see guys who are flashes in the pan early on. I don't think that that's Jaden Daniels necessarily, but I'm interested to see what it looks like.
You do know about flashes in the pan early, that's for sure.
Yeah, we might have one. There might be one in Green Bay. Who knows?
You might have paid up a little bit too early on that guy. I don't know. Have a good day.
Thanks, Eric. You too. Well, now I just want to play more of this Jerry Jones audio. But before we do that, let's take one more call. Wisco Sports Show. Who says?
It's Darnell.
Hey, Darnell. What's up?
Hey, as a fellow owner of an NFL team, I have to sympathize with Jerry just a little bit.
Yep.
I mean, the guy took over a franchise, right?
Mhm.
That was the Cowboys were a very important franchise in the NFL at that time. And then as soon as he takes them over, they win Super Bowls,
Yep.
right? And then all people tell him is, well, it wasn't actually your Super Bowls; it was Jimmy Johnson's Super Bowls.
Sure.
And then now, ever since he basically ran Jimmy out of town, they haven't won jack, right? And it's been 30 plus years since then.
That didn't stop, by the way. I don't know if you saw the clip, Darnell. Stephen Jones at this press conference when referencing this championship drought, put it in air quotes. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I don't know that that's going to play well with the fans because that's a legitimate drought. You haven't been to a conference championship game in 30 years. Don't downplay that.
Exactly. And then the best chances that you get, you lose to your arch rival Packers. Seriously, like they've go back to their divisional round losses the last 2 decades. It's to the Packers. It's kind of hilarious because that's the team that they beat when they had Jimmy Johnson.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So it's like it's kind of funny that it just keeps going back and forth. And that's just what sports. That's how sports play out always. You know, like it's
cyclical.
Yes, cyclical. Something like that. It's like it always goes back on exact opposite of what it used to be.
It's like a pendulum.
And I feel bad for Jerry just a little bit because now he's really old and senile, and he just says really, really stupid stuff. But I don't think he's trying to be like outlandish or stupid. I think he's just old and he's sick of losing, so he's trying anything at this point to get over the hump. And obviously, you know, the stuff that he's doing now is absolutely not going to work, and it's funny watching it happen, but it's also sad at the same time. So kind of feel for him.
I look, there's a certain segment of Packers fans, appreciate it, Darnell, that will never feel an ounce of sympathy for the Cowboys just because of the 90s. I didn't live through that. That doesn't exist in me. It's not intrinsic to my sports fandom, right? I don't really have a problem with the Cowboys. They've been crummy my whole life. The Packers have treated him as a doormat my whole life. There's something, I get a kick out of Jerry. I don't know. The league is better with owners like Jerry, these big personalities. And, you know, Darnell makes a good point. It's like Jerry takes over the team. They stunk. Most people told Jerry it was a bad investment. And you can go back, and he's not making that up. You can go back and find literature on that. And, you know, financial people being like, this is a dumb investment. Turned out to be one of the best investments anyone's ever made. They immediately win. And everyone well, that was Jimmy Johnson. That's not Jerry Jones. And to a degree, it was Jimmy Johnson. And you have to understand that as a sports owner. Like, you'll get credit for hiring the right people, but you're never going to be credited like the players or the coaches on the field. Ever. That's just and sports owners need to understand that. And I think some of them struggle with that to the point where, let me play you this clip. Jerry talked about it in his press conference yesterday, and maybe this is a part of the, you know, the problem or the condition that haunts Jerry Jones. Maybe in his old age, there's other conditions too, but like he talked yesterday about one time I wanted to be a coach. And I think maybe that's why he had such a difficult time in the 90s, to Darnell's point, watching his team succeed, but everyone give credit to the coaches and the players. He's like, what about me? Well, Jerry, you're an owner. But I think there was always something in him. It's like, well, I wanted to be a player. I wanted to be a coach. This is him yesterday. I have no idea the context. I just cut a bunch of clips off of Twitter. I think these clips are even funnier without context. I don't need to know how he arrived at this statement. I don't need the question asked. I just think it's funny.
As a matter of fact, I wanted to be a coach. Except I wanted to live better than I thought coaches live. I wanted to drive a little bigger car, and I wanted to fly in an airplane. Had I known what I'm paying them now, I'd have been a damn coach.
Had I known what I'm paying him now, I'd have been a damn coach. God, guys, he's entertaining. I know we all want to roll our eyes. Well, he's the reason the Cowboys aren't winning, and I think to a degree that's true. I think it's not his radio hits. It's not his press conferences. That's all secondary. It's the fact that he's the general manager and they handle contracts in this weird way. We're going to wait as long as possible and drag everything out as much as possible to pay as much as possible. That hampers you a lot, right? The way they handled CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott's contracts this last offseason, it completely hurt their ability to spend money and to add elsewhere. The team needed it. I don't think Jerry Jones hires bad people. We'll see how Schottenheimer turns out. I don't know that Jason Garrett was a horrible coach. I don't think Mike McCarthy was a horrible coach. I think Jerry Jones is, in a lot of ways, a good owner. And I don't think the noisy media stuff, I don't really think that impacts the team's ability to win. I think in this last year, it was a lot of the contractual decisions and the timing of those decisions. Here's Jerry Jones talking about, and again, I have very little context. I wanted to keep it that way because these comments are funnier when you have a lack of context. Here's Jerry Jones talking about his ability to find coaches.
So I've seen it when I was a pup. I have a good background in the makeup of what a coach is. To think that you could make a decision in an interview and not have talked, if you didn't and hadn't ever communicated or had a visit, I wouldn't dare have had an interview unless I talked to many, many people.
I just love his storytelling. He talks back when Oklahoma, Barry Switzer and all these guys. Like, he is fascinating. He'd be a fascinating podcast guest. Good radio interview too. He did a media scrum after this press conference. I had the whole thing on YouTube earlier. I watched a lot of it. It's an hour long. He then did a media scrum after the press conference where he talked about fan reaction. And I think the question must have been, hey, fans really don't love this hire. What would you tell them, or how does that make you feel? Here's his answer.
There's a very low percentage of this that is smiles and glory holes. Very low percentage.
And I think glory hole is an oil term. Let's look it up together. Glory hole. Our IT person's going to run up here. Glory hole oil. This is a risky search at work. Yeah, petroleum production. Glory hole, parentheses, petroleum production. In the context of offshore petroleum industry, is an excavation into the seafloor designed to protect the wellhead equipment installed at the surface of a petroleum well from icebergs or pack ice. An economically attractive alternative for exploiting offshore petroleum resources is a floating platform. However, ice can pose a serious hazard to the solution. While floating platforms can be built to withstand ice loading up to a design threshold, for the largest icebergs or the thickest pack ice, the only sensible alternative is to move out of the way. Floating platforms can be disconnected to the wellheads in order to allow them to be moved away from threatening ice, but the wellhead equipment is fixed in place and hence vulnerable. The keel of ice or pack ice can extend far below the surface of the water. Don't we know it? If this keel extends deep enough to make contact with the seafloor, it will scour the seafloor as the ice moves with the current. To protect the wellhead equipment from possible scouring, a glory hole is excavated into the seafloor. The excavation must be deep enough to allow adequate clearance between the top of the wellhead equipment and the surrounding seafloor. The resulting glory hole can either be open or cased. A cased glory hole utilizes steel casing as well as a retaining wall, while the open glory hole is simply an excavation. So I guess that makes
sense. There's a very low percentage of this
kind of
that is smiles and glory holes. Very low percentage.
So that's an oil term. I don't really know how it applies, though. Let's take another call or two. We got time. We don't need to take a break anytime soon. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, hey, how you doing? It's Ryan.
Ryan, what's going on?
Right now, actually, funny enough, I was doing a mock draft, but I was
good for you,
because that's my depraved habit. As soon as the Packers are, even as I'm about to start beginning to sense that they're going to lose, like, and their season's going to be over, I just can't help it.
Well, and the Senior Bowl's going on. We're getting that buzz too, and it's a good night for you to call because we've kind of been evaluating Brian Gutekunst and his process, his job, his plan, as it's been written by Domofsky today.
Yeah, I didn't get to see that latest article Domofsky wrote, but there's certainly a lot of critiques floating around about his first round track record, and it's worthy of criticism. Now, I think there's just a bit of a thing with Gutey about first round guys. He wants traits, he wants tools, He wants the stuff you can't coach. And the theory is, yeah, you can coach them up and everything else is there, then they're going to be sky-high elite players. But that's a boomer bust proposition, as we know.
And I don't think that's necessarily bad process. Like drafting toolsy players in the first round, I don't think that's bad process. It just hasn't worked out. So maybe that's coaching, or maybe he's drafting the wrong guys. I don't know, but it hasn't worked. And I'm not in a position, Ryan, when people call or text the show and be like, hey, all of these first round picks really aren't all that great. I can't really argue. What am I supposed to say? How could I defend it?
Yeah, it's a very hard thing to do because otherwise you're going to just make yourself into an armchair GM when there's 1,000,005 of those out there, and each of them is as qualified or unqualified as the last, technically speaking. But
Yeah.
man, there's some names that if you don't mind me floating some out, I think these are going to be targets. Jade Barron from Texas, the corner.
I've heard
Although
that one.
it's funny, he's just really versatile. The Pro Football Network mock draft simulator that I use a lot lists him as a safety, but he's a corner. But he can play nickel and he can play outside and he can play deep if you want him to. He's extremely versatile. Although this class is thankfully just loaded with D tackles, which the Packers
Who's your favorite?
do better. Some of my favorites are Derek Harmon from Oregon, and these are favorites that are in the Packers pick range. Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. That's Nolan with an E, not an A.
Nolan.
I was a little surprised. Nolan, yeah. Kenneth Grant from Michigan. He's a 6'3", 340-pounder. And then the other guy who's ranked a little lower on this board, Deion Walker from Kentucky, now they're saying 6'7", 345. This guy moves like a tight end. And he swims through blocks. He is just an absolute nightmare up front. And he is he screams Packers D tackle, just in terms of the kind of player that they could have to make other guys work better in that scheme.
Yeah, the traits, right? And the traits they're looking for, certain things that you can't coach, especially high in the draft, Ryan. I appreciate it. We'll talk more draft. I'm going to stop lying and say I'm going to get into the draft this year. I probably won't. I'll do a good enough job. I'll do a good enough to be prepared for who they take and to talk about them for the most part. I'm not revisionist history draft guy in that. Look, I'll second question the picks and why they didn't work out better. I'm not going to go back. Well, they took this guy here, and then in the next 5 picks, they could have taken it. That's so easy to do with hindsight. That doesn't do anything for me. We're just talking big picture strategy from Brian Gutekunst. He's been good. I don't know that it's in Gutey we trust. Next year's the year. Okay, well, I don't know. Next year better be pretty great then. If it's all building towards next year, it better be pretty great. I got to take a break. I'm woefully late. If you're on hold, I promise I'll get to you on the other side.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
There's a very low percentage of this that is smiles and glory holes. Very low percentage.
Very low percentage. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, everyone. It's not all smiles and glory holes. I am a quick detour for 2 minutes. Maybe a very busy day here. I'm getting a lot of texts. And by many, I've gotten like 4 or 5 because I'm going to be out of town next week. It'll be at Radio Row in New Orleans. Thanks to Flipside Bar and Grill, by the way, our sponsor that sent us to spring training a couple of times in lacrosse, and now going to chip in and help send the show to New Orleans next week. So appreciative of Flipside and their support of the show. Excited to be back there in April for a broadcast, maybe just one before. I will keep you abreast, WKTY listeners. But I'm going to be gone next week. I'm going to be out of town. My significant other will also be gone. She has a sales meeting, national sales meeting. So we're both going to be gone. There's like an overlapping window of 4 days, Sunday through Thursday. We're going to be gone. We have a cat. I don't want to take him to a kennel. You know what I mean? I would like for him to stay there. Automatic feeder, water, like that. But he can't be alone that many days. Someone's got to check in on him. And they make apps for such things now. Rover, I believe, is an app that people use for dog walks and such. But we live in this big building, very friendly. Lots of older folks. I'm like, there's got to be someone in this building who likes cats. There's got to be other cat owners who literally 10 minutes a day just walk around the corner of the hallway or walk up one floor to our apartment, check in on the guy, give him a treat, give him some pets, throw some toys around. 10 minutes, you're in and out. So easy, right? So I hung a flyer in the entryway of our building. Very friendly, small town feel. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. I didn't put my apartment number, didn't put the days that I'd be gone. Felt that would be wrong. I don't want to announce to the world where we are and when we will not be there. But the poster said, cat lover, ? And it said, we're looking for someone to just check in on our cat. You know, these days, just need to pet him. Just give him a treat. Just give him some human contact for 10, 15 minutes a day. Here are the days. I put his little picture there. It said, if you're willing to help out, just text this number. So I got a text last night. I was like, I live on the first floor. I'd be more than happy to help you out. I said, all right, let's meet up later this week. And then I got a text today from a woman who says, I have a cat myself. I'd do it for free. I would just love to pet a cat. And I told the guy, I felt bad. I'm like, I know I said we'd meet up. The position has been posted. Is it wrong that I just trust a woman more to do that? I would rather trust a woman to do this. To give them the key to my apartment and to check on our I trust a woman more. That's just what my instincts are telling me. I asked one other coworker today. They're like, yeah, I think that's right. And then since then, I got another text from another woman. She's like, here are my cat. 2 more pictures. I'm going with the woman. And I'm sure the guy's a nice guy. He's like, I'm always around. I'm normally home around 4. I do a lot of work from home, so I'm around. I'm going with the woman. But I'm fielding texts. I've had to tell like 3 or 4 people I should take the sign down when I get home in the entryway. Faith in humanity restored a little bit. That faith in humanity will be gone if I get back from New Orleans and our apartment's been robbed. Of course, they leave the cat. Like, okay, great. I lost all my possessions and now cat's still here. Let's take a call. Sorry, I just need to share you. It's just it's like I've been screening candidates. Like I'm hiring applicants today is what it feels like. 608-321-1670. Thank you for waiting. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Great. Great. Let's actually take our break now. I just got a text from Mike Clemens. I didn't think he'd be with us today because he was with us yesterday. So let's take a break. We'll chat with Mike next. It's the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
and they're going to win. Green Bay survives. Brooks, 94, with the penetration right through the A gap between the guard and the center, gets his left hand up, the kick's a little low, and that fingertip is all you need from this distance, and it is absolutely heartbreaking for the Bears. Wow. Exhilarating for the Packers.
Just like you draw it up, right?
Special teams highlight of the year, block kick to win a game. You know, the further removed we get from the season, I think the way that it shook out, and this is what I would tell Bears fans if we were squabbling over our teams, the Bears should have won that game, and then the Packers should have won the other one. Both teams should have won at home. Instead, it flipped. The Bears definitely deserved to win the first. The Packers won it. I think the Packers, I don't know, deserved, but should have had every opportunity to win the second and lost. So I think the results were just flipped. And I've been thinking more about that as we get further removed from the season. Here to continue to talk about the news of the week, the Packers news of the week. Rich Bisaccia has been extended. Luke Gutey is back as well. So we're talking about assistant coaches they're looking to replace Jason Rebervich. Thanks to the Bay Motel in Green Bay for sponsoring his hits. Mike Clemens is here. Mike, how are you this evening?
Pretty good. The Luke Gutey story is interesting. Now, Luke had come into the Packers as an offensive assistant, and then he was a receivers coach. And he would do different things. He had Devontae Adams and, other good receivers, like at practice, keep using your hands. And so do things like, bounce tennis balls off the wall and try and catch these things one-handed, just like different things that your hands can grip, your hand-eye coordination. And it actually kind of worked, like juggle balls. Just all kinds of things for stimulation. And it sounds a little silly, but really Devontae kept doing that after he left the team, and he went to Mississippi and became an offensive coordinator back there. Then he came back and he was a quarterback coach for Aaron. Aaron liked him, but then he moved on and he got offensive coordinator with the Bears, but he had to deal with Justin Fields, and they didn't have an offensive line. Then he went to the Raiders, and we know what dysfunction junction that is. So Matt LaFleur brings him in as an offensive assistant. Not only just because, hey, I think he's a smart guy and we can have him on the team and help out Jordan, et cetera. And Sean Mannion might be, who is a backup quarterback for the Vikings. Maybe he's going to be named quarterback coach. We haven't heard that yet. But, Tom Clements is leaving as quarterback coach. So at least you got Gutey back in the building, and he's done that and can help out. But what? This is kind of a spare tire. Adam Stanovich could still be hired away as an offensive coordinator. He's the offensive coordinator right now, last 3 years, after Nathaniel Hackett left for the Jets job with Aaron, right?
Yep.
So here's the deal, though. There's some coordinator jobs out there, and if Stanovich would leave, how could he make that lateral move? Well, he could be the play caller for some of those teams. So that would be a promotion.
Yeah.
And that would be his way, of justifying, the move. I don't think he wants to go, but that's the way he builds his career, is, getting a reputation as a play caller before it would be the next step if maybe someday he thinks he could qualify as a head coach.
That's the next step. That's the step that LaFleur took, right? Was offensive coordinator, but under an offensive coach, couldn't call plays. So that's why he went to Tennessee. That would be the step. Just to really quickly on Luke Gutey, Mike, because we got this during Bill's show, to Packers fans who say, well, he's just bringing back someone who'd already been here. He's just hiring a buddy. There's nothing new here. Packers fans who feel critical of the Gutey choice, what would you tell them? What would be your pushback to that, if you have pushback?
He's a Mike McCarthy guy. Matt inherited him. So Matt doesn't owe him anything or have to bring him back or anything. Matt worked with him. Aaron vouched for him. And I just think enough people in the building think, no, he's a good coach. He's a good coach. He can coach your tight ends. He can see things. And actually, his first assignment is going to be to help out Halfley. His actual first assignment is going to be, all right, this week we're playing the Vikings. Then I've been tracking everything the Vikings in the last 4 weeks. Now it's Vikings week. Here you go, Jeff. Here's, I've already done the work for you ahead of time.
Sure.
So, and that's almost like the hire that Ben Johnson made, a 28-year-old offensive coordinator who, has been around the league. And it's like, well, this guy's so young, and Well, look, at Ben Johnson's going to call the plays, but he wants a 28-year guy who's going to have to grind, who's going to have to write down every one of these plays, who's going to have to pull out, the scripts and that kind of thing, and get things and do things the Ben Johnson way. But he's going to have to do all the long hours so that Ben Johnson can be the administrative thing. These head coaches, I mean, they spend all Tuesdays. Okay, I got a meeting for 45 minutes with the travel coordinator. Then I got to talk to strength and conditioning. Then I got to sit in on a meeting about promotions. That's what these guys do. So that's why you get these 28 to 32-year-old guys that are practically living at the facility and going through all the tape and itemizing that and saving the coach 3 or 4 hours so the coach can just pick it right up there and saying, okay, what's the start of this process, and now how do we start actually formulating that Tuesday afternoon into the final game plan that we start introducing the players first thing Wednesday morning. So,
all right. So that's all shaking out just fine. I just wanted to ask you a little follow-up on Gutey because I know some Packers fans look at that sideways. The big story is Bisaccia's coming back. I don't think he was in danger of leaving. I think his agent, Mike, you could tell me if I'm right or wrong. The fact that we got Cowboys buzz and then we got some retirement buzz, that's out there, I would think, because the agent's trying to help him get an extension. Mission accomplished. Well done, if that's the case. Packers fans look at this and say, okay, but the special teams really still aren't all that good. And you're rushing to extend him with a year left on his contract. I don't know that most Packers fans look at this move and are super psyched.
I'm trying to give Packers fans an honest assessment.
Sure.
I don't think, I could be wrong. There could be some young 32, 33-year-old special teams coordinator out there that's just a great coach and gets into the heads and makes it simple, and that anybody that you put on his roster and he can improve your special teams points. You could go 15 points up the charts to ranking, be in the top 10. Rich Goslin say, I don't think that guy's out there. And Rich Bisaccia is this side of Belichick about knowing everything about special teams, offense, defense, rule books, game management, that kind of thing. I honestly think that where the Packers, when I look at the Packers roster, if they're making mistakes on special teams, that's really more of an indication as to how far they have to go on the roster. That it's either too young of players,
really
too inexperienced of players. I think it's exposing the roster to more needs. Take, for example, Robert Rochelle, a cornerback who had been drafted by the Rams, an okay player, great guy, enthusiastic, working his tail off. But, the Rams that's okay. Wait, let him go. 25, 26 years old, free agent. Packers pick him up, put him on practice squad. They'd put him in a game if they needed him, if they needed a little more depth, if a Corey Ballantyne was hurt or something. And then he might get to play a game or two or 2 or 3 elevations during the season. And then they would, he had a big game where they were playing remember the Dolphins, right? They play the Dolphins, right? And so it's in the cold, and Daniel Whelan gets a nice punt off, and the guy muffs the kick, and there's Robert to recover it, gives it, they're deep into Miami territory. Jordan Love in offense takes over, and 3 plays later, boom, they score, another dagger touchdown in that big win over the Dolphins. A couple of weeks later, they're down there in Chicago, and he falls for the fake, or it's actually in Green Bay, he falls for the fake punt return, right?
Yep.
Where, the DJ Moore put his hand up, looked like he was going to get the kickoff. When in fact the ball was, kicked left, and that's where it was punt left. And well, Robert was the first one down the field because he fell for the trick, right? So that's the idea of what's going on. These guys, they can make huge plays one week and they can screw you up the next. The other thing that I think I started noticing, and this is the great thing about when you're at the games, is to watch the operations. And you can't possibly see this on the TV. Like, they as soon as there's a transition in special teams, they go right to, commercial. Maybe they do a slow-mo replay of the last play. And what you don't see is Matt LaFleur now, he peels off from the sideline. He goes back and talks to Jordan Love or Malik Willis. Then he's over there talking to the receivers. Now he's talking to some of the coaches on the side. Maybe he's checking in with one of the doctors, like, how's this guy coming along? Is he going to come back? Is he out? Is he coming back from the sprained ankle? Whatever. And that might be now first down, second down. The defense is out there. And Jeff Hafley's upstairs in the booth, and he's calling defenses, and there's making substitutions. Well, who's watching some of these substitutions? Some of the position coaches, like a linebacker coach or defensive secondary. But the other guy who's standing on the sideline by the refs is Rich Bisaccia, the special teams coordinator. So I asked Bisaccia about this, about managing the game when the defense is on the field and LaFleur is back there trying to catch up before he gets ready for his next offensive set of plays.
If Matt is the play caller and the defense is on the field and he's got to meet briefly with Jordan or something like that, you or the coaching staff, you're kind of watching the sideline there for him. I mean, what's your involvement?
Well, fortunately, I get to be on the headset with Coach, and he has the ability to go to both, and to flip on and off to the offense, so I have the privilege of just being able to watch defense when they're on the field, and we're always getting ready for third down, right? And because third down ready is either on offense for the punt, or third down ready is offense or defense for the punt return team. So I get a chance to keep watching how the substitutions are going, both on offense and defense, and a little bit more help to Coach would be on the defensive side. And, so if you see something, or if Coach needs to be alerted for possible timeout or something like that, it's usually done communication-wise through the headset.
Is there more to it than just information?
Well, I really think it goes back to the preparation part. We're all looking at the same film, and we're all looking at different things. And again, a credit to Brooks and to TJ and to those guys, because they do a good job of watching the film on their own. And then on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, we have big field goal protection meetings and that part of practice on the field. So, they can give suggestions or things that they see or what they'd like to do or positions they'd like to be in. And then we get to talk about it. So we all thought, going into that game, that we had an opportunity possibly to get our hands on one. And we'd been close, last couple of weeks we've been close. And then, the big one that no one really talks about is, Kobe blocked a PAT at the Ram game. If I remember correctly, that came down to a close game, so it just happened to be the last play of the game in this particular game. But again, going back to the 53-yarder, which has kind of been his max. I think he's hit a 54-yarder. He's missed on a 56 indoors, and we really thought we could get our hands on that one. Came out a little bit low and just missed it. So real appreciative of our guys getting their hands on that last one. But, we do say a lot of things during the course of the week and the night before a game. And so I wish they'd all come true, but that one worked out.
And let me interject there, Grant. I mean, what we're also having a discussion. This is like the week after the Packers hold on to win 20-19 with the Carl Brooks blocked field goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the coach and the players are working to say, look at this weak spot on the Bears left guard. If we double up there and pressure there, there's a chance that we could get a block in. If they're 50 yards or back, the kick's going to come out a little bit lower, and we might be able to get a hand on it. Let's dedicate ourselves to doing that. And son of a gun, it got them a W out of that game. So, you hear Bisaccia, and he's referring to every kick this guy has made in the last 2 years. They're spotting things like that. He's got players that are looking at the tape and participating, and they're coming in with their own suggestions as well. It's like, how much more coaching and leadership are you looking for? And right now, this is why Bisaccia's got a 2-year extension on a contract for a 64-year-old coach.
The first half of that answer, the takeaway before he got into the nuts and bolts of special teams, he just sounds like LaFleur's conciliary. I mean, he's his right-hand man, right? He's keeping an eye on this, keeping an eye on that. Is that an inaccurate description? He sounds like LaFleur's lieutenant, his number 2.
Hence, Rich Bisaccia's title as of a year or two ago, and it also helped him get a pay raise, was special teams coordinator / assistant head coach.
Yeah.
Now, I want to prove to folks, I'm not, working for the Packers. I work for Packers fans. And I'm not afraid to call out a knucklehead, like our friend Frank Signetti. Frank Jr., his dad was a coach at, I think it was IUP or something like that. His brother has done a fine job of turning around the program at Indiana, right? They had a great season. That's his older brother. Frank is, he's part of the family and a Pittsburgh coach, and he's gone around. He's been assistant coaches for like the Rams and the Giants and and around. Actually, I think he was in Boston College for a while. But this was the beginning of the end for Mike McCarthy when other guys, like Van Pelt left and other guys were leaving, and McCarthy kept on bringing in Pittsburgh guys or guys he could trust, guys that maybe he owed something to. Because I think, Cignetti's dad had helped McCarthy at one time and early in his career. So they bring in this Frank Cignetti, and I mean, you could tell Aaron Rodgers was rolling his eyes, like, really, seriously, you're replacing these guys with this guy? He's a goof. There's one time we asked Frank Cignetti, who was the quarterback coach of the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers in 2018, which turned out to be the final season of Mike McCarthy. Like, hey, there was that one play. Now Aaron was on the sidelines, and there's been some of these weird calls about if the player's foot can be in and out or they can come back. And what do you think about that call? Yeah, I don't know about that either. I'm gonna have to look that up in the rule book for you. Like, what? What? How much do they pay you for this? And here's another one where he just held a meltdown at a presser when we were talking about, hey, here's some plays that were in that game on Sunday, like 3 days ago. And, what did you see Aaron doing? Because Aaron was throwing balls into the dirt and it was 2018. I mean, like a week or two later after this is when McCarthy got fired because they lost to the Cardinals. And this was the quarterback coach, Frank Cignetti Jr., at this press conference, about 15 of us in there chatting with him.
Well, when you look at completion percentage, ultimate team game, some of it's decision, some of it's, throwaways, protection. You just keep working on making great decisions.
Is his accuracy been okay though, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Just coming together, doing the best job you can, taking advantage of opportunities.
Did you have a chance for a big play on that one? Equinemius Cinco bent it inside. It was a blitz.
Well, anytime you'd like to always take advantage of plays,
So what happened on it?
I'm trying to think of which play you're actually talking about here.
It was a deep blitz. I think 32 blitzed right, open to Aaron. I mean, it was like he was free runner right at Aaron, and he threw it up. And
yeah, I can't think of the play right now.
Way to insulate yourself, protect yourself.
I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, that's what I would like to avoid with whoever ends up being the Packers' next quarterback coach. Well, Mike, I got to run. I know we'll talk a little bit more throughout the week, either on this show or Bills, and then we'll be in New Orleans. We'll get to talk a lot more next week at Radio Row.
Talk to you then, Grant. Thanks, pal.
Appreciate it, Mike. Some fun audio from years back. I forgot about that. We'll wrap up the Wisco Sports Show next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Wrapping things up. Appreciate Mike Clemens. If you missed that conversation, you can find it in the podcast. It'll go up in just a couple minutes after 6 o'clock. I will cut it and post it. Some good conversations about Brian Gutekunst as well. Tomorrow, we'll talk a little Brewers. I was thinking we'd get to it tonight, but I didn't know Mike was calling. I assumed that because we talked to him yesterday that he'd take the night off, but that's not Mike. So we'll talk a little Brewers tomorrow. There's one area of the team that I'm looking at, and I give the Brewers benefit of the doubt because no one thinks they're ever going to win as many games as they do. But there's one position, I don't know that I love where we stand going into spring training. So we can talk about that. You know what? In fact, let's lead with it tomorrow night. Barring breaking news, we'll start with Brewers Talk tomorrow night. I'm looking forward to that. Enjoy the evening. Bucks are in Portland. We'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow as well. Enjoy the game tonight. Thank you for listening always.